everybody, and welcome to the Family Matters interview series. Thank you so much for choosing to join the presentation tonight. We're very happy to have you here with us. Just a few reminders that all of the lines will be muted throughout tonight's presentation. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and enter them into the chat box along with your email address, and a member of the BCAT team will respond to you within 2 to 3 business days. We are pleased to have Dee Pekruhn joining us this evening to answer the question, what's the difference between independent living and assisted living? Understanding the different levels of care and how to decide which one is right for your family member. Dee joined the LeadingAge National Office in 2019 after over 15 years serving as an administrator and senior leader in 3 CCRCs in Northern Virginia. And CCRC stands for Continuing Care Retirement Community. Originally from Pennsylvania, Dee earned an MBA in nonprofit management at George Washington University and became a licensed nursing home administrator in 2014. That same year, Dee was enrolled in the LeadingAge Leadership Academy, a year-long leadership training program. Dee is also a trained CARF surveyor, a certified dementia practitioner, and she is Lean Bronze certified. However, her most important promotion, or is that training, came this year when she became the mother of her now 9-month-old son, Amir. For Dee, serving in the aging services field is a calling, a passion, and a lifelong avocation. And joining Lee tonight is Lynn Young, the Vice President of Operations at Manspot Health Tools. So at this time, Dee and Lynn, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Family Matters. Today, we are joined by Dee Pekruhn, the Director of Life Plan Community Services and Policy with LeadingAge. Dee, welcome.
Thanks so much, Lynn. It's so great to be here and wonderful to meet everybody this way.
Thanks for taking the time to join. We really appreciate it. Dee, can you tell our families a little bit about your background and your current role at LeadingAge?
Absolutely. My background goes all the way back to when I was 10 years old and a Girl Scout. And I used to volunteer at nursing homes as a part of our Girl Scout troop. And then flash forward to my career beginning after college, I started working in an assisted living as an activities professional and worked my way up from there. So the first 17 years of my career have been in direct care service with older adults. I became a director and then an administrator at retirement communities throughout Virginia. And now I work for LeadingAge, which is a national association of homes and services for the aging. My role is on the policy team. And I bring together the concerns, the challenges, the victories, the great stories about members from across the country who are particularly, working in life plan communities, or CCRCs as they're also known, and bring forward those concerns in a lot of different ways, in advocacy to the Hill, generating resources, sharing information, education, and training, and so forth. So I get to support life plan communities across the country, and I absolutely love it.
Sounds great. It sounds like you've done a little bit of everything over the years.
Yeah, I've driven buses, I've done hair, I have done activities, I've been an administrator. It's been a great joy in my life, to be honest with you.
And your current role, the work you're doing now, I know you focus a good bit on advocating for older adults, ensuring that seniors have access to the services and all of the support that they may need. And I know that can sometimes mean a loved one moving from a home environment to some type of other residential setting. And that's a really tough decision for families to make. How do family members know when it's time to start looking for some type of setting that might provide more support?
Well, and that answer is going to be different for every family, first and foremost. And I want to emphasize too, it's so important that it is a family decision. That means working together with your loved one, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever it might be, uncle, aunt, and including them in that conversation. Because you know, I will say some of the most difficult transitions I've ever seen have been the ones where the older adult was not involved in the decision making or even the awareness stage where we're talking right now. A lot of times, you know, you can see those large and small declines over time. Typically speaking, you know, the family members who live closest and spend the most time interacting with the older adult tend to notice some of the smaller signs ahead of the larger signs. It can be simple things like it's more difficult for them to manage their social schedule, their social calendar. Details start to be forgotten that they never used to, you know, have a trouble tracking, like appointments or bank account statements or whatnot. All the way to you come to visit and the home that used to be in pretty good order. And hey, we all have our messy days. We all have, you know,
Sure.
piles of laundry in the corner sometimes. But if you notice, you know, over time or chronically, you know, the living environment is starting to degrade. They have clothing that's clearly stained or soiled, teeth, you know, starting to not look as good, difficulty navigating the environment. You can see these things start to accumulate. And another symptom sometimes is withdrawal. You know, if you find it's harder to get in touch with your loved one, you know, you used to have that phone call every Monday at 5 and they're missing the phone call, they're not answering, or they seem more avoidant in conversation. That can also be a sign. A lot of times, you know, people may realize they are starting to struggle, but they don't want to admit it. They don't want to recognize it. So most often at the beginning, they'll try to mask it. They'll try to hide it. They'll try to cover it up in some kind of way, because at the end of the day, you know, nobody wants to face the fact that that time is coming and maybe a transition is near.
Yeah, those are all really great suggestions, things to be on the lookout for, things that may have changed in the home or even on the person. Some things like you mentioned related to hygiene. I imagine there are also situations where there may be some safety issues, right? Are there any situations that you've seen in the past that really signal, you know, this is a little more emergent, that we need to get your loved one a little more assistance or maybe even 24-hour supervision?
Yes, definitely. And not to cause alarm prematurely. However, if you start to see your loved one having a repeated series of falls, and that could seem minor at first, you know, little tumbles here and there, there's no injury, but you start hearing mom or dad saying, oh yeah, and I tripped and stumbled, or you see them fall over, you know, that's one big indicator that there's a significant or serious issue underlying what's going on. Also wandering behavior, extreme forgetfulness. We're all familiar with that story of, you know, you mentioned it before, Lynn, the pot on the stove that's left where the water is boiled out, small kitchen fires, burned popcorn. You know, those kinds of things are indicators that things are happening in the kitchen that put the person at risk. You know, extreme forgetfulness, you know, somebody gets in the car, they used to always go to the downtown mall and they're gone for half a day. And when they get back, you know, they're not even quite clear on where they were. Or sometimes, you know, a stranger has helped them get home, or the police have helped them get home. Anything where you can clearly see the person is no longer in command of their memory, their environment, or, you know, operating a motor vehicle. Those kinds of things are major signs and symptoms.
Okay. Yeah, I can imagine that'd be very concerning to a family member. So if they're at the point where now they're starting to think about, you know, maybe I do need to look for a place for my family member, there's a lot of options out there. I know it can be really confusing to families. There are many different levels of care, and not every single older adult needs to move straight from home into, let's say, a nursing home. Can you give us a little bit of information or an overview about the differences between all the different types of care that are available? For example, I know there are things, communities out there that are independent living, and there's other communities that are assisted living. What's the difference between those two levels of care?
Sure. Let me take one quick step back. There are supports and services that you can have brought into a person's home. And then there are residential based options like independent living, assisted living, which I'll definitely define. In-home supports and services oftentimes can be a nice segue or a gentle way to progress into maybe a residential setting down the road. That can be something like home care or home health. You're probably familiar with both. There's also another product out there. It's called continuing care at home. And that's a special type of insurance product that, at another time, I could get into greater detail. But that gives people support in their independent home in the community, but it links them up with something like a CCRC for down the road if they ever do need to have a higher level of care, like assisted living or nursing. There is a difference between home care and home health. Home care is personal care, companionship. It's not your therapeutic services. It's not your Medicare reimbursed services. Those are home health. So if you have a physical therapist coming in, you have a nurse coming in who's helping with medication management, those types of things tend to be covered under home health. But I want to mention that it's important to know there are some solutions you could bring into the home initially that mom or dad or grandma and grandpa might be more accepting of at the outset, especially if you're struggling with that recognition that there is even a decline. There's independent living and assisted living, as you just asked about, Lynn. It's really important to know that independent living is supposed to be pretty much like living in your home in the community in terms of the things that you can do for yourself. If you're in independent living, you should still be able to manage your bank account. You should still be able to do laundry, dress yourself, participate in social activities, volunteer, maybe even still work. Driving and all of those other life skills are usually still quite intact. It's independent living and called that for that reason. A lot of times people confuse independent living with assisted living because of what we see on television and ads and so forth. But assisted living is a distinct level of need and care from independent living. That means that, and these are some acronyms you should start to get familiar with: activities of daily living. They're also called ADLs, or independent activities of daily living, IADLs. These are the types of things that we normally do for ourselves during the course of our daily lives, that once a person starts to struggle with those things and needs a little help, that could be an indicator that it's time for assisted living. In assisted living, those are individuals who need help managing their medications, for example, or getting dressed for the day. Maybe they need reminders that, oh, right at noon today, I have lunch with Susan, or I need to make sure I have that doctor's appointment and get to downtown for my cardiologist. Having the transportation arranged for the individual, those kinds of things. In assisted living, the person, there's some portion of their life, or maybe multiple aspects of their life, that they're not able to really manage independently. And that's why the names of the levels of living are different. I would also mention, as you start looking at communities, there are differences sometimes in how a community will define what is independent living and assisted living and when that transition happens. I think it's vitally important to have that conversation up front in the sales office when you're sitting there. How will mom or dad know that it's time for them to make that move or that transition? I say that because a lot of times once people get into independent living, they don't want to move to assisted living. For a long time, they will do their best to stay put in independent living. And for all the reasons I just defined, why people might not want to leave the home at all.
Sure. Dee, are there any communities out there that have both an independent living and an assisted living component?
There are almost 2,000 of them in the country.
Wow.
They are called life plan communities, or CCRCs, continuing care retirement communities. And what that means is you have everything all under one proverbial roof. Now, it might not actually be a physical roof, because some have little houses, cottages, apartment buildings, and then also assisted living and nursing home residences. So you'll find typically, though, all of those levels of living are on the same campus, where you'll start off, the normal progression anyway, in independent living. Again, being able to pretty much fully live your life independently. You just don't want to have to mow the grass anymore. You don't have to deal with.
Sounds pretty good.
Exactly. It used to be positioned as sort of resort living. You get all those little hassles of daily life relieved of you. It's not that you can't wash the dishes anymore or vacuum the carpet, but hey, you've got housekeeping services included. It's not an inability, it's a desire to be relieved of, burdensome tasks. So yes, you can live in a community where there are the distinct levels of care, and then people will typically progress through those in order. It's really great for couples, especially. We see a lot of times couples will join a retirement community, and then one person or the other will just age differently. That's how we are as individuals. And so it might come a time where one or the other spouse needs to make that transition to a higher level of care, maybe a memory support, which can also be found on a CCRC campus, or the nursing home. And so then the other spouse can stay in their residence and yet still be part of the same community, the same group of friends, the same host of activities. Most in this day and age, CCRCs offer a broad array of things to do, engaging activities and programs that are open to everybody on the campus. So just because you live in the nursing home, it doesn't mean you can't go to the concert on Tuesday night. You know, all of it's available and open. So the spouses can go get dinner together, and they can still go see the show that's on campus. And yet everybody has the right level of living for the care needs that they might have.
Well, that sounds really excellent, for the perfect solution for sons and daughters out there looking for something for their parents. You mentioned two other levels of care that I want to make sure we have some time to talk a little bit about: skilled nursing and support for memory care. I know those are a little bit different from the independent and the assisted living settings. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Definitely. Let's start with memory support or memory care, because you can actually find memory support for assisted living or memory care for the nursing home setting. Some organizations have both. Some will have a memory support segment in their assisted living and then another memory care program in their nursing home. And why is it different? Well, primarily it's because, and this is where learning a lot more about dementia and the other progressive cognitive diseases is really important. The way that the brain changes with a dementia diagnosis, and keep in mind, not all dementias are the same. Alzheimer's is just one kind of over 70 forms of dementia. So as the brain changes with whatever the progressive disease is with dementia, you know, you can have different physical needs that start to pop up, as well as cognitive changes. So in memory support for assisted living, usually those individuals are at a higher functioning cognitive state. Usually, as we call it, a 1 to 3 on the global decline scale. That's the very beginning, mild to moderate. That means, you know, some forgetfulness, you know, maybe a little bit of wandering behavior, but not a whole lot. Still fairly oriented to time and space and the people around them, but it's getting challenging as time passes. They can also still typically, if they're ambulatory, able to walk, still typically able to use most of their senses, able to do basic tasks like feeding and dressing themselves. Once people progress further into degenerative dementia, they start to not only have much more cognitive confusion and losing other essential pieces of not just short-term but long-term memory, they also start to have a lot more physical decline, because your brain starts to not only forget facts, figures, and faces, but it also starts to forget functions of your body. So that means the person might not be able to feed themselves anymore. They might need help with toileting because they've become incontinent of either kind. They might need help showering. They might need help getting dressed because they don't, it's not just, they're not physically able to, they don't remember how to button a shirt. It's one of the things I was taught with personal care and dementia. It's not so much forgetting where the toothbrush is located. It's forgetting what the toothbrush is for. And so you start to see somebody, instead of using the toothbrush to brush their teeth, using the toothbrush to brush their hair, or using the toothbrush as a pencil, because you can see they've started to lose the connection between the object and what its purpose is and how you use it. And it's around that time you also start to see those other physical declines. And so then it's usually time for them to move into a specialized memory care program in a nursing home. So I want to talk about memory care first. Now let's put that segment to the side and talk about nursing care. So nursing care, I mean, most people, the image that comes to mind is people in wheelchairs, but it's not really that simple. And it's also not that people have completely lost all of their abilities. People in nursing homes still have a fair amount of capability, may not even have any cognitive decline. So just because you're living in a nursing home, it doesn't mean that you've lost any part of your cognition. I've known people in nursing homes that were, nuclear physicists who were still doing crosswords, playing bridge. It's
right.
just they had macular degeneration and they had other, physical issues. They weren't able to walk, but the mind is still there and functioning and very active. So nursing care has multiple components. You can have short-term rehab. So that's the quintessential, I fell, I broke my hip, I need a quick place to recover. And then I go back home again. That's one component of nursing care. Another component, or what they call post-acute. Another component of nursing care is long-term care. And that is your individual who has progressed to the point where they're not able to do those other basic tasks of personal care for themselves, and they need someone to manage them. Now, they also could have progressed in other ways, other senses, significant, vision loss, significant mobility loss, and so forth. And that doesn't necessarily mean, that they don't still have, as I mentioned, other abilities and skills. And so you'll see in a nursing center, there's usually still a lot of really robust things going on for people to engage in and be a part of. And I want to just emphasize that again, even if you're at the point where you think your loved one needs a nursing home, and you've talked to folks, and yes, that's the right level of care, it's still really important to make sure that person is as involved in the decision-making as they possibly can be, because they're still an individual, they still have rights, and they still can make choices. You might have to boil down those choices into a smaller array of what they can manage cognitively, but they still can make choices and decisions. And the more that you can involve them and reinforce their autonomy, the easier that transition will be. I promise you. I promise you.
Yeah, I'm, as you're talking, I'm thinking about a family member out there with a loved one who's maybe fitting some of these descriptions that you're sharing with us today, who may have some of the physical impairments and or some of the cognitive impairments as well. And they may be finally at that step where they're ready to look for some type of residential placement. Maybe they've gone the route of the home support, and maybe now they're ready to start really looking. There's a lot of options out there. I know I'm sure it's very overwhelming for family members to kind of go out to these communities, to tour them. Do you have any suggestions for questions to ask? I know you're mentioning taking the older adult with you, let them be part of the tour if it's appropriate. Maybe if they have any questions they would like to have answered. Are there any sort of go-to sort of really good kind of core questions to ask or things to look for if you're walking around a community? What might someone be looking for to make the best choice?
Well, there's a whole host of things I would suggest. And again, it really depends on what level of care, you're looking at transitioning into. Because if it's independent living, you might be looking for other specific things versus nursing care. However, one of the things that I think any of it has in common is you want to know how good the care is in the nursing home, whether you're starting in independent living or you're starting there anyway. Because at some point, that is where you or your loved one is going to be receiving the highest level of sensitive care that you're ever going to need in your life. And you want to make sure it's an environment, it's people, and it's a place that is going to be comfortable, supportive, enjoyable, and free from hassles and annoyances and incompetencies as well. So I've always recommended go and see the nursing home. See if you can talk to the director.
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, no matter what level you're starting at, go see the nursing home. See if you can talk to the director of nursing. See if you can talk to a few residents who are there with permission.
Idea.
And try to have some conversations. What's it like living there? How is the food? What types of programs go on during the day? What are you able to participate in? See if you can talk to some of the staff members. You want to ask questions about staff satisfaction, staff compensation. What's their turnover? How are the staff trained and educated? What are the annual requirements above and beyond what the state requires or the federal government with the nursing home? See how satisfied people look. Does the place look clean, tidy? When you walk in, what's the appearance of people? Both the staff and the residents who are living there. Where are they gathered? Are there rooms designated to do things in outside of the residential areas? What things are residents able to bring with them? How much can they personalize their space, whatever it may be? Do they get to pick the wall color? Do they get to bring their own furniture?
That's a great one. I wouldn't have thought of that one.
Oh, definitely. This is going to be the place that you or your loved one may be living for the rest of their lives. And maybe
it's going to be home for them.
Yeah, it needs to be. It needs to be home as much as it possibly can be. You want to ask, and I will mention this because I'm a big proponent of social workers and mental health and behavioral health supports. Ask about what kind of mental health and behavioral health supports are available beyond medications. Do they have a social worker on staff? Do they have a geriatric psychiatrist who comes out? Is there any other type of supervision of mental and behavioral health offered to the residents? Even if you think mom or dad is in perfect functional form when it comes to their emotional health and mental health, you want to know that there's that support available, because this is a hard transition. It is hard. As nice and as beautiful as the place may be, and as friendly as the staff, and no matter how many milkshakes they serve every day, the reality is it's hard.
It's a big change.
It's a giant change. Your loved one is facing a lot of loss, a lot of transition. It's hard on you as a family member. You're going to feel guilt. You're going to feel, did I do everything I possibly could? And of course you did, but it's still going to carry a lot of emotional baggage, even for the healthiest, most robust and safe and secure relationships that you have with your family. So you want to know that the organization makes it a priority to be a custodian of the mental health of your loved one, and also you. Are there support groups available, for families? How often can families be involved in making suggestions and having feedback?
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Is there a resident council? Is there a family council? I could go on and on, Lynn, as you can see.
These are really great suggestions. Just things to kind of maybe jot down on paper before you go and have your questions ready, so that you're able to get this really comprehensive kind of snapshot of each community that you might be touring. I know we're almost out of time, but I wanted to end with this one final question, Dee. If families are looking for resources, they want to learn about these different levels of care, or they're looking, they're starting to look for a community that might be right for them, where do they start? Do you have any suggestions of how to get started?
I do. LeadingAge. Of course, I'm going to say LeadingAge. We have a wonderful, robust membership of over 5,500 aging services providers in the country. So you can go to leadingage.org. There are search engines that you can use to try to find providers by state. However,
great.
Of course, there's not just LeadingAge. There's many others. There's Pro-Aging Sourcebook, also called the Guide to Retirement Living. They do a lot of great matching and mixing. You can manipulate their search engine differently than ours to try to find other ways to find the right match for your family. I always encourage you to go onto CMS, the CMS website, and there's a nursing home locator tool that you can use, and it will help you determine by location and also by quality rating which nursing homes, if you're specifically looking for that. But even if you're not, you want to know how well the nursing home is wherever your loved one might be living. There are professionals called geriatric care managers, and a lot of these, Lynn, I'll send you over the links and so forth for everybody. But a geriatric care manager is, I think, a worthy investment. It's a private individual that you would hire that can help as a consultant you identify a much more personalized fit for you or your loved one, and many others. Lynn, I'll be happy to send you a list.
Oh, that'd be great. We would really appreciate that. You've given us a ton of really great information today. I think our families are going to walk away with some nice, actionable first steps on this journey of making these decisions with their loved one, and for the best, quality of life and independence for each individual person out there. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of levels of care. So they now are armed with the right questions to ask and what to look for, and some new resources that they can include in their journey on this, sometimes difficult path of taking care of older adults as they may change through the years. So we thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your expertise with our families today. We really, really appreciate it.
Oh, it's absolutely a pleasure. I hope we get to do this again sometime.
Yes, we'd love to have you back. Well, thanks so much, everybody. That's the end of our session tonight, and we will be sharing those resources with you as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dee. And Lynn, like you said, Lynn, that was a lot of really important information and direction for our families. We'd like to take a minute now, if you haven't already, to invite you to become a member of the Enrich Brain Health Program by signing up on our Enrich website, which is enrichvisits.com. And if you're interested in more information from the VCAT Research Center, you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And I have those links up on the screen for you now. If anybody has any questions, you can enter them into the chat box, and a member of the VCAT team will respond to you via email within the next 2 to 3 business days. And just thank you guys again so much for joining tonight's episode of the Family Matters series. And we hope to see you again in April for the next episode called The Happiness Factor, a physician's perspective on focusing on quality of life for persons with dementia. I'm going to go ahead and just leave the meeting up for a couple more minutes, just in case anybody has any questions. And otherwise, I hope you guys all have a great night.